Today I'm going to talk about Module 68, which is on schizophrenia. This is a disorder that is characterized by delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, and inappropriate expression of emotion or lack of expression of emotion. So, this disorder is considered a psychotic disorder. That's like an umbrella term. That means a disorder with irrational ideas, distorted perceptions, and kind of like not being connected to reality. So, schizophrenia is studied a lot because it's a disorder that's found all around the world. Um, it has both positive and negative symptoms, and by this we do not mean good and bad symptoms. It's kind of like in the learning unit where it means added things are positive, and then things that are like lacking are negative symptoms. So for the positive symptoms, things that are added and extra are things like paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, and tears, laughter, or rage at times when it's like unexplained, um, or doesn't make sense to have those reactions. Whereas the negative symptoms are things that aren't present, such as a toneless voice, an expressionless face, or an unmoving and rigid body. Um, these things are also called the flat effect, which is just like when you don't express any feeling. So for people with schizophrenia, like they did this experiment, they saw that their brains reacted less to like the pleasure of like a money reward. So it's showing something's like wrong with that like emotion like response. Um, so let's get into what some of these like symptoms mean. So delusions are false beliefs, um, usually of persecution or grandeur. So for example, like believing that you're being chased or someone's trying to like kill you. Hallucinations are false sensory experiences. So whereas delusions are false beliefs, hallucinations are false sensory experiences. Like, for example, hearing voices. Um, when it says disorganized speech, that's kind of like a word salad, which is just an illogical like stream of words that don't really make sense. They can still like form sentences, but they just don't make any sense. Um, yeah, kind of like just nonsense, like talking. Um, some people think that schizophrenia is because of a lack of ability for like selective attention. So normally we're able to like pay attention to the most important things, focus on one thing, and then ignore everything else. But for people with schizophrenia, like every incoming stimuli, every thought, every memory, everything in the environment holds like equal weight on equal like demand on their attention. So they get easily distracted by like tiny details. Um, yeah. So, chances of recovery, about 1 in 7 recover, but there is a difference between chronic and acute schizophrenia. So for chronic, um, it's also called process schizophrenia because um, it develops slower. It usually starts around late adolescence or early adulthood, and it kind of gets worse as it goes along. There's usually more negative symptoms involved, so like that withdrawal type of thing, and it's not very likely to recover from this one. Um, Usually, men develop it about 4 years earlier than women, and they're more likely to have chronic, and it's more severe, and men just get schizophrenia more often. Um, the other type is acute schizophrenia, which is also called reactive, and this is usually like someone's fine, but then some sort of traumatic event triggers it, and it could be at any age, and there's usually more positive symptoms, so those added things like disorganized speech, hallucinations, paranoia, and usually this one is more likely that you'll recover, and like drug treatment can help more. um, yeah, so looking at the brain and things that are different in the brain, um, one thing is interesting that they find usually people with schizophrenia have too much dopamine or too many dopamine receptors. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes they could use drugs to help with that. The frontal lobes are kind of like less active, which makes sense because they're less like judgment. And then the thalamus, um, when they have them like in an fMRI during like having hallucinations, they can see that the thalamus, which processes sensory information, is actually active. Um, so that kind of makes sense. And then when they're experiencing paranoia, the amygdala is active, which is like our emotion and like fear processing center. Sometimes they also find enlarged fluid filled ventricles in the brain and a thinner cerebral tissue. And the thinner the tissue, usually the more severe it is, as well as less like connections across the brain. So, yeah, there's multiple different brain regions that are impacted. It's not just like one. Risk factors could be like if the mother had influenza during pregnancy, or if there was a famine during pregnancy, and if she has diabetes. Um, Also, sometimes low birth weight. They find that it is like genetic somewhat because the chances of schizophrenia are 1 in 100, but if you're related to someone with schizophrenia, it becomes 1 in 10. And if you have a identical twin, then the chances are almost 1 in 2 that you will also have it. So they find that, yeah, like even twins who are like separated from birth or have been adopted, even if their even if their adopted parent has it, they don't like catch it from their adopted parent. It's only if their biological parent has schizophrenia that they're more likely to have it. And there are like some environmental risks that they find, but none of these risks can really predict it or moderately even correlate with it if you don't have a relative who has schizophrenia. So the environment factors, they can play a role for sure, but the genes are like the biggest thing, and then the environment can kind of like turn those genes on or off. But if you're not like related to someone with schizophrenia, they can't really find any like environmental things that would cause it.